All right, guys, welcome to the Halloween edition of the Jordan Garber Now podcast. Obviously, you know who I am, and more people know who Don Vega is, also known as the Punisher. Man, it's great to have you on. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing right. I'm doing all right, man. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. It's a pleasure. And I just want to talk about humble beginnings in the very beginning. You know, you had a few trainers that helped you become quite a successful all around performer. And talk about those humble beginnings. You know, when you started out in the business, do you think you're going to stay in it?
Well, it's typical story. I watched growing up. I fell in love with wrestling, and from a very early age, I was into like contact sports. I did a little bit of amateur boxing and taekwondo, but all those things were with the mindset of this will help me for because wrestling was my passion. So I found this flipping through channels. I found this local independent promotion in New England called the New England Wrestling Alliance. At that time, I was about 14 years old. So I found out that the place was like 10 minutes from my house. So from then on, I decided to start going to shows. Uh, I went and spoke to the promoter at the time, and he turned me down because I was a kid. But I didn't let up. After bugging him for about 2 months straight, he finally gave in, and with my parents' consent, he gave me a shot, and that's how it all started for me. I started, building the ring, loading the trucks. I'm sure you know about those stories, taking the ring down and putting it up, going to shows or whatnot, and training.
Definitely, and it always one thing I always learned in wrestling is you never stop paying your dues. You know, whether you start from day one or you're 35, 40 years into it. Wrestling is always something that you always pay dues in, and it teaches you a lot of life lessons as well. Who are those first few guys that kind of helped you get to that next level in terms of being having the mental capacity of being in the business? Because it certainly isn't an easy one. Because if it was, everyone would do it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, early on, there was a few guys that took me on, and one of them being this guy called Anthony Rufo. He actually trained same class as Triple H at the old Walter Kilpowski
Oh, nice.
school. He was one of the first guys to kind of take into me, started teaching me stuff. There was others around that time, but Anthony was, since then he's passed, but he was one of those guys that, opened up to me. And from there on, after like a year and a half of training with him, I moved on to a different school, which was led by this journey guy in New England area, Mike Baker. And Mike, pretty much, he was on another level as far as teaching and all the fundamentals and the stuff that he showed me, the basic tools, if I may say.
Where did you like learn your first, introduction of like in-ring psychology, and not just that, but how important it is in a match?
Oh man, it's definitely that's like the key to every match. I mean, without psychology, there's nothing. You have to have a reason why and everything you do in the ring. And for me, that started with Mike, but seeing other people come in, guys that I saw that were leaving at the time in this area, guys like Scott Taylor, which became Scotty Too Hotty later on, you know, Pete, just incredible. Was another guy that wrestled in this area a lot, and I used to see all those guys and see how different their matches looked from just learning the moves and just doing a bunch of moves and not making any sense. So I saw how those guys were working and kind of self-taught myself a lot, but at the same time, later down the line, I must have had already 5, 6 years into it. I started doing training seminars, and the first time I went to a training seminar was with Dr. Tom Pritchard's,
Oh, nice.
and and that was day and night for me, man. Because at that time you start getting a little bit of a secure spot where you think you know something and you know what you're doing, but at that point in time it was like day and night for me. I learned that I didn't know nothing, and there was a lot more things that you needed to learn, and I certainly did.
Let's talk about this promotion, the one that has a lot of legacy, especially going into the late 90s, early 2000s. Power League Wrestling. You know, even wrestling at McCoy Stadium or McCoy Field, home of the Pawtucket Red Sox. You know, talk about all your memories there with Power League Wrestling and the evolution you've seen from start to end.
Well, Power League Wrestling was another one of those federations in New England that house a lot of different talent, guys from like guys like Johnny Curtis now that is known as Fandango and in WWE. I mean, a list of guys from this area that are now doing bigger things all went through that umbrella of Power League Wrestling. And for me, it gave me the opportunity to be in front of a crowd and wrestle consistently, because back then they were running a lot of shows. So definitely one of those learning tools that I used to my advantage as far as being in the ring as much as I could in front of an audience.
As a well-rounded and respected veteran, looking at the scene in Rhode Island only, because that's not a province. Oh my goodness, I'm from Canada. It's not, but a state. Talk about Rhode Island as a state in terms of independent professional wrestling and the product it delivers on a daily basis. Is it kind of a hot product right now, or not so much, or has it changed through the years?
It's changed over the years. Back in the mid 2000s, it kind of diminished as far as the talent that was coming out, because as you know, there's tons of promotion nowadays. Some were not so well trained guys, so Rhode Island kind of got a rub for that, and the Northeast Massachusetts area got a rub for that. But then later down the line, you started seeing a lot of guys come out of the area, and WWE took an interest on certain guys. Guys like Kofi Kingston that got picked up from the Massachusetts area,
CW.
Tommaso Ciampa, yes. I mean, you name it. If you look throughout the ranks, you're gonna get a lot of guys based on this area that came about here, and certainly New England now I think is a hotbed for talent.
It is definitely huge. Let's talk about your experience here. Am I correct, Top Rope Promotions? Because you had a good career there as well. Is that correct?
Yes, Top Rope Promotions, if I could rewind a little bit,
absolutely,
was known as Yankee Pro Wrestling back in the day. This is, from like the 90s all the way to the early 2000s. It was Yankee Pro Wrestling, and they cross-promoted because it was two promotions under the same banner. So otherwise, Top Rope Promotions was the name of the company, but it had separate promotions like Yankee Pro Wrestling and South Coast Championship Wrestling. So that promotion gave me the opportunity to start working a lot of international names and television stars. And I kind of made my name in this area working for Top Rope Promotions.
Awesome stuff, man. We like to do a top three here on the podcast. It's basically always a positive top three. Top three guys you've worked with throughout your career that you want to go on a road trip with, and maybe share a few stories along the way with that answer, if you can.
Oh man, that's a good question, man. Definitely number one is actually a promoter. Now, I don't know if you've heard of any stories from prior guests or anything like that, but there was this promoter in particular that I worked for as well. His name was Mike Spotter. And Mike was quite the character. He used to run a federation called the World Wrestling Alliance. And if you talk to New England guys from back in the late 90s, early 2000s, the stories that come about from Mike are unbelievable. Just him in the car for a ride, that's all you would need. So
second coming of Herb Abrams, or?
Oh man, they're close. They might be related, man.
Oh my, that's
they might be related. Remember the name, because I'm sure you're gonna have another guy that's gonna have a story about Mike Spotter. he's definitely one of a kind and definitely the right character for pro wrestling.
Sounds like someone I want to have on the show.
Yeah, man.
We love that. Ask those
Definitely.
hard hitting questions. That's for sure. Yeah, definitely. Road trips are fun. I remember just going on the road, and while I was on the road, veterans always in the front seat, learning the rules of the road. It was just so much fun because veterans, they don't have to take me on the road. An aspiring journalist and referee, they don't have to do that, but they take the time to invest. And it means a lot. And guys like you, I cannot thank enough because you've given so much. And without you, I wouldn't have a chance to train to referee or be a podcaster even, because that involves being in the business as well. So, your contributions, Don, have been absolutely amazing. What would be one of your favorite parts about being in this business for 22 years?
Definitely the excitement you get being in front of an audience. I've done other sports early on, and there's nothing like wrestling. There's nothing like the fans of pro wrestling. It's just like it's kind of like a drug, man.
It's captivating.
You just can't. Yeah, you just can't get it once you had a taste of it. So definitely being in front of an audience. And for me, just like I said before, it was always a dream as a child, and I'm sure it's cliche because a lot of guys say that. But to been able to been blessed with being in the ring with a lot of guys I grew up watching from my era, a lot of the older guys that I have the opportunity to wrestle, it's certainly a privilege, and I'm forever grateful for that.
Absolutely. Well, Don, I want to thank you so much for being on this Halloween edition of the Jordan Garber Now podcast. Where can people follow you, on social media? Whether that we have listeners listening in from Winnipeg, Ohio, Rhode Island, and all the way to Australia. So where can people check you out?
Yeah, you can check me out on Instagram and Twitter at pun, P-U-N, Don Vega. And on Facebook, you can look me up as the Punisher Don Vega.
Wonderful. Well, Don, thank you very much for your time and for being on the podcast.